This is my shop, and I just wanted to do a video of it before I move here in the next 5 to 7 weeks. Everything that's in here will have to come out and be moved about 200 miles west. This will be the second time I've had to move the shop, but it has grown substantially since the first time I've moved it. And this is a 2-car garage, and it's split down the middle by that dividing wall. So there are 8-foot doors on either side, and that wall was here when we moved here, and I never bothered to take it down because I knew I'd be moving again, so I've kind of just used the shop or the space as I found it and made it work. Those shelves were here when we moved in, and I've obviously done a lot with those. I thought I was going to get everything cleaned up and do a nice video so you could see the clean bench tops and everything, but I realized I was packing things up last night and I was never going to get stuff completely clean enough to do a nice video, so I'm just going to do it as it normally is, really, and show you what it's like in here. And this big top right here is for a dining room table, and that'll be the last project to leave. That's hard maple top, and over there in the cardboard boxes are the legs that were purchased for it, turned legs. So it's a farmhouse or a harvest table. And I'm standing on the threshold to the kitchen door. The shop is a shared space, and right here is the washer and dryer, and above that is some cabinets with finish in it, some miscellaneous stuff that's just kind of been shoved up there. It's pretty tight right here, and you can see to the right of the door is just extra carpet, mostly junk. It's kind of been stuck there and forgotten about, except the press. And the trash and recycling are right here. So it's kind of tight here, and I'm going to step out. And on the left, next to the washer and dryer, is the first workbench, and you can see it's got a bunch of very wide, narrow drawers, and I've got everything in there from files and hammers. There are sheets of plexiglass in there, glass, scrap aluminum, and it's all welded, and the drawers just run on angle iron on either side. I didn't make it, but the thing that I like about the bench the most is the stainless steel top that's on it, and it's perfect for putting motors and other stuff on there to tear apart, and I don't have to worry about getting the woodworking benches dirty. And on top of the back of the bench here is just a ton of hardware, and it's actually, unfortunately, just one of many places where hardware is in this garage. And but this is the most commonly used stuff. This will be the first place I stop if I need particular screws or small nuts and bolts, any brad nails, and everything else is in here. And right there in the corner, you can see where all the wires are coming out, is the breaker box for the house. And I've just kind of put wires up as I needed them. Knowing that I was going to be moving, I just kind of threw things in there and let it go. And it's been pretty functional. And there's the lamp that sits on top of the phase converter. There's the start and stop. And you'll notice over here on the left is a cord that looks just like a dryer cord, and for 4 years I've been swapping that cord in and out with the dryer to turn the phase converter on. And I am looking forward to having a phase converter hardwired in and not have to mess with that cord swap. And then turning to the right here, I've got a small grinder, and that big tall cabinet there has got a lot of different stuff in it. The opening is on the left hand side there. And this is the Newman 20-inch planer. I've been rebuilding that for 3 years now, I think, and it's basically ready to go. I haven't really bothered to put it together. I got it all assembled and tuned up, and then realized with everything that's in here, which hadn't really been here when I first put it in, that I would not have room to swing it out and run it. And so I've just kind of left it with plans to get it in the new shop and get it finished up. And really all that's left is that side panel and a motor cover up there. And behind that is the I forget what the brand name of this is. It's an import wide belt sander. Lobo, that's right. 12-inch wide belt sander, and it's actually kind of a neat machine. I've never seen it's almost like a benchtop wide belt sander. It is extremely heavy though, and it's not much fun to move around. But it does work well, and I've only had it for a year or so, but I use it pretty often, and I'm glad I picked it up. And behind that are just some shelves with all kinds of stuff in them. There are some pull-out bins here that have peanut butter jars in them. They've got washers, nuts, a lot of larger things that just don't fit in the smaller bins. And then here is just a collection of junk. I've got starters and pulleys and projects that are half done, spare wire and everything else. There with the cardboard box on it is the horizontal borer, and normally I just swing that out when I need it, and which isn't all that often, but it's kind of a cool machine, and it's not something you see in a hobby shop all that often. And I've done some projects where it came in really handy, and I was happy I had it. And behind that, I'm going to step back here, is the Delta 20-inch bandsaw, and again, that's just been a mechanical rebuild. I did not bother to paint this. I kind of like the look of the color on it, although the bottom shows a little more rust than what I'd like. But I've utilized that and really been happy that I managed to get it wedged in here, and most of the time you can see all the stuff that's in front of it. I just push stuff out of the way to get to it. And behind that is the compressor. That's a 5 horsepower compressor, and for some odd reason it's only on top of a 40-gallon tank, but for me that works well. It's not very tall, so it doesn't take up a lot of space, and if it had an 80-gallon tank on it, it would obviously be probably close to twice as big, and you can see there's not a ton of floor space in here. And behind that is just a bunch of automotive stuff, some lights and stuff on top of the shelves that go right up to the door. And there's the grinder that's stripped paint and nuts and bolts and rust for years upon years. It's probably the most used and most abused tool in the whole shop, but it's still going. It's a Winsoda, I think, 6-inch grinder. Never had grinding wheels on it. Always just wire wheels. And eventually I got smart and finally took the guards off so I could use it without bumping into the guards. And here, this is I think the last machine that got kind of wedged in here was the Tenonor rebuilt at Iron Fest in 2012. And I kind of got it knowing that I was only 6 months away from moving out of this shop, and I knew I could kind of stick it here at the end of the joiner. And luckily, with the table pushed all the way back like that, the wood will clear right over the arms of the Tenonor, and I can do about 75 inches joining on the joiner without a problem. And if I had to do anything longer, I would just pull the Tenonor back a little bit. Behind that's the water softener and some other miscellaneous stuff, and the furnace and water heater are here. And the yellow DeWalt planer is the one that actually gets used. It's on an old Delta radial arm saw stand, and I just wheel that out and go right down the center, right here beside the joiner of the shop. And I just have a portable dust collection. So really the joiner and the planer are the only things that I plug in the dust collection, because they make a huge mess or they get clogged up if they're not plugged in. And that's a 12-inch American joiner, and you can see it's got stuff packed all around it. But I really like this joiner. It's a direct drive. It takes forever for it to coast down. So that'll be one of the more fun things to move out of here. And behind the planer, with stuff wrapped all over it and tucked on it, is a Weaver screw press. And when I was changing the bearings out on the Newman planer, it was one of the ideal things to have. And I think the table for the press is still all the way down there at the floor to press out the bearings on those feed rollers and the cutter head. And just above that is more junk. And then we're on back here to the main bench, and this little aisle right there between the end of that bench and the beginning of that cabinet are where the squeezing has to come through. So you either turn sideways or you're skinny enough to get through there. And luckily I've been skinny enough so far to make it through. And I'm just kind of turning around now on that same spot. And this is an Equipto cabinet with drawers, again, that are just all full of hardware. Washers in that one, nuts in that one, and there's miscellaneous electrical connectors, a big grounding strap. Who knows where that came from. On the bottom of this cabinet is all of the portable power tools. And there's saws, routers, sanders. They just all kind of get tucked in there. And at the very bottom, this metal box right here is a big push and puller set. And above the Equipto box is just some boxes with bearings and miscellaneous stuff. And above that is just all the different spray paints and cleaners and lubricants for the different machines. And a fire extinguisher, which I'm not actually sure has ever been worked or tested. So I have no idea if it actually works. And at the very top of the cabinet are just some jigs and stuff that very rarely ever get pulled down. Behind that cabinet is another 4-drawer cabinet. And I don't know where this one came from, but it's got nice big deep boxes that all kinds of stuff can fit into. Mostly I have electrical and plumbing stuff in there, and some switches and things like that. Beside that is the Fleet tool board, and other than screwdrivers, I think I've got all the Fleet tools that originally came on that board on it. Never been able to find a Fleet screwdriver that matches the scripting on the Fleet name to fit that board. Below that I've got just another cabinet full of tooling for the mortiser, the routers, and shaper stuff. Again, there's a multitude of stuff in here. Wrenches and stuff for the routers. Spindles, cutter head for the shaper. There's a Hargrave board here for chisels and punches. And I used to just throw them in a drawer. I kind of like having them all up and in the holes so you can actually see what you're grabbing for and not have to fish through there. To the right of that is the Delta disc sander with the shaper sled on the bottom of it there. To the right of that is the Powermatic 45 lathe. Again, cram packed in there, just all kinds of junk in here. I've never really had the space that I wanted to do much turning in here. I built this cabinet for the grinder and the Wolverine jig and just all the different lathe accessories. But what I like to turn are bowls, and there's not much room to swing the bowl turning tools in here. You either hit the back wall or you're bumping into something. So I've done more spindle turning, and when I say I've done spindle turning, that means I've done like 4 projects on it. But I always try to practice it and get better at it. It's just, it's never been a priority, and it's kind of something that I did when I had downtime. And above the lathe is just a bunch of cabinets with all kinds of stuff in them. Blue tape. I used to work for 3M, a lot of people know that. When I left 3M, I had an unbelievable amount of blue tape, and I have still not gone through it, which I'm happy about because it's rather expensive stuff to buy, and I didn't know that when I worked for 3M. Filters, again, all that stuff came from 3M. Glue and some dyes, pyramids, and cabinets aren't very well used, but that's okay because I don't really like using them anyway. I forget to look in them half the time. Above that is just some boxes for storage. And to the right of that is the big hardware cabinet, all full of baby food jars. And I bought this whole cabinet, and I could tell the story, but I documented on OWWM. There's a guy cleaning out his shop, and my dad and I basically went in there and bought as much as we could, and this cabinet was one of them. And he was very meticulous with his organization and had labels on everything, and I have loved owning this cabinet. It takes up a massive amount of wall space, and with the other cabinets I could probably consolidate it all down, but there's just too much organization for me to bother with it, because everything's already laid out. Jars with labels on them, a lot of separation from metric to stainless steel, and then up at the top, as he got older, he would collect stuff but not sort it as much. And there have been many times where I've gone through here and found some odd piece that would work perfectly. So I've just kept it as it is, because I kind of remember what's in here and I remember where it's at. I find when I start moving hardware around, I forget where I put things and I end up double buying, which drives me nuts. To the right of that is the main woodworking bench. It's on a steel frame with a wooden top on it and a Wilton vise stuck on there. It's got a kind of a arts and crafts style shelf. There are the other two pieces for it there on the far left. That needs to just be finished and sent out the door. It goes to a friend of mine. Above that are just some of the rarely used F-clamps that I have. I've got some bigger ones in the back that I'll show, and those are the ones I go to first. These are kind of the light duty ones that I don't really mess with. Swinging back here to my right on that big steel cabinet are the nut drivers. I got that Fleet tool board, and I liked having tools out so much I started looking for more vintage tool displays, and I kind of like having things out where I can see them. Granted, they get covered in sawdust, but I know right where everything's at, and I don't have to open drawers or fiddle around finding stuff. And most importantly, it doesn't work well for the nut drivers, but I can always tell if something's missing because the slot's open. Like there should be something right there in that spot. So I can better keep track of where stuff's at. To the left of that is the Powermatic drill press, and below that it's got a King feeder on the base, which just kind of straps onto your table saw fence, and it's got 4 wheels on it. Kind of nice, and the woodworking top for the drill press. And I used to have a 20-inch Walker Turner in here, and I really liked it, and I've always felt that going down to the Powermatic was a bit of a step down, but for the size of work that I do, the Powermatic has been pretty ideal. And I put a crank on the bottom here so I could raise the table up and down, which is one thing the Walker Turner had. And I've always, as soon as I got the Powermatic, I knew I wanted to put the crank on it. I found one on eBay, put it on there, added the light. Behind that is just a board with saw blades and stuff on it. That came with my Unisaw. That was one of my original OWWM purchases, and I've kept it. The prior owner had all of the molding heads and cutters shadowed into the on the board with their labels and everything. And I just like how the older guys took time to do all of that stuff, because I don't. I put it in a cabinet and forget about it basically. Below that is the screwdriver storage. Again, this is another, I think this is a Challenger tool display, and it fit perfectly all my screwdrivers, all Craftsman, and all the slots are filled, so I know right there in the back that I'm missing one of my flathead screwdrivers. And to the left of that, this is all just a pegboard, so clamps, pipe clamps, parallel clamps. In the very back there are some F clamps and straight edges, T-squares and things like that. Right in front of it here is the radial arm saw, and that kind of overlaps the extension wing of the table saw. And I knew with this narrow shop I was never going to be able to crosscut very much on the table saw. So I've just gotten in the habit of using the radial arm saw, and I've actually liked it quite a bit because the table saw provides the support, and if I ever have to crosscut anything really large, I just pop the top off of the bench or the drill press, and I can cross cut pretty much all the way over to the wall here, which I've never actually had to do, but I have had to take that the top off the drill press a few times to be able to get it all in here and get something cross cut. But that's worked well, and I think my only complaint is that I hate having the radial arm saw up against the wall. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but with the knob on the back I smack my knuckles against the wall, and I don't know that there would be a ton of room to get a dust collection hood back there in another shop. I know other people do it, but I would actually prefer to keep it just like it is, because the radial arm saw in turn provides support, infeed support for the table saw. And I don't do a lot of ripping down plywood in here. I can do it. You have to move some things around, and you've got to have every surface in here cleaned off, but it's not much fun to do, and I found that I'm not very accurate with it. And that may change with more space, but for now I take the plywood out to the driveway and cut it down, and then I'll rip it to final width in here. And to the left of the radial arm saw cabinet is just another file cabinet with sandpaper and miscellaneous sanding accessories in there. I've got another cabinet back there where the dovetail jig sits, and just a lot of miscellaneous stuff that basically catches dust. And you'll see dust everywhere in here because there's no dust collection. And after 4 years of never having cleaned the shop out, it's getting to a point now where I have a hard time coming out here without stirring up a ton of dust and choking on it. So I built a little box behind me that it's got a blower in it, and it just pulls the air through a couple filters, and it does help. It does filter the air, but I think in the next shop I'm gonna get my cyclone set up as soon as I can and get dust collection on all the machines and just not have to worry about so much dust sitting on everything. The table saw, if you hadn't seen it, that's a 3-phase unisaw. Originally was a single phase, but I wanted more horsepower, so I got a 3-phase, 3-horsepower motor that still fits the oval opening and still fits, if you can see the goose egg back there, still fits within the goose egg. And I put a magnetic starter on it, which I have magnetic starters on almost all the machines. And I've really enjoyed bumping up to horsepower. With the carbide saw blades, it cuts much nicer. There are the magazines that I started packing up. And behind the saw is the Delta Shaper, which is both outfeed support and a level surface for the saw. So if I have anything really wide, when I was doing a headboard, I would have one leg on the shaper and one leg on the saw for the glue ups. And with the feeder on there, if the feeder's in the way, the rest of the shaper is light enough to just kind of spin it in place to get the support arm of the shaper in the right spot. Behind that are the big heavy duty F clamps that I mentioned earlier, and my regulator for the compressor comes in on this side. That's an old regulator that came from the same guy that I got all the hardware from. That's another one of his cabinets with more peanut butter jars full of bigger stuff. The welding table, it's got fire brick on top of it. There's the arc welder back there, and mostly this thing is just kind of full of stuff that collects back here. That's I think a 4.5-inch vise, and the oxygen and acetylene torch is right back here behind the shaper. So I got that oxygen and acetylene set up a few years ago, and I've really enjoyed having it. I use it quite a bit, probably less for welding and more for just heating parts to get things apart. There's an import horizontal bandsaw there on a welded stand. That's one of the first things I've welded. Didn't do a very good job, but it does hold it up, so that's, I guess, what matters. Delta 14-inch bandsaw, that was purchased with the Unisaw, and one of the, again, one of the first things that I had purchased. And a Fay & Egan Lightning mortiser, foot powered, not an automatic feed. I'm going to step back here, turn around for the width of the shop. 1x42 belt sander, followed by the Acme sander, and above that is just some batteries and chargers, lights, and stuff like that. And above that is the only real wood storage in the whole shop. The rest of it is just piled up everywhere, as you'll see up here. Beside the Acme is the Craftsman toolbox. Again, kind of overflowing with stuff. And to the left of that is the State Spindle sander. And to the left of that is the Arbor press. And there are some Hargrave clamps that I had used to glue up that big maple top. They're still laying out. And like I said, bits of wood kind of everywhere. And this is what the shop looks like here from the back. So it's a tight space. There's not really much room for two people in here. There's a lot of bumping around when my kids are out here. But I've enjoyed the space. I really like the projects that have come out of here. And I am not looking forward to getting all of this packed up and moved. But it will be done eventually. So thanks for watching, and let me know what you think.